Hey, it's Grady at Twin Creek Audio, and today I'm going to show you how to set up and mix with an 8-bus recording console. I'm going to use the Mackie 8-bus as an example because it's pretty similar to a lot of other recording consoles or 8-bus recording consoles, and a lot of the inputs and outputs and the connections I'm going to be using are on the top, so it's fairly easy to see. So let's see how this works, and then I'm going to actually play some tracks back through the Mackie with some of the outboard gear that I'm connecting to it. We're looking at the top of the Mackie 8-bus console, and in this video we're going to talk about mixing through the console. I'll do a separate video about tracking or recording through one of these. So basically we want to connect the outputs of some kind of an audio interface to the tape inputs. You can also use the line inputs, but if you do that you have to remember to press the mic line switch. So I normally will use the tape inputs if it's a recording console and it has them. So you just connect the outputs of your audio interface to the tape inputs, and then in order to bring the tape inputs down through the main channels on the console, you want to press the flip switches at the top of the channel strips. You can see I'm getting signal through the console now with the signal present LED down here. The reason that flip switch exists is because back in the old days when you had a tape machine, you would be using your main channels to record to tape, and then the Mackie has a mix B section, which a lot of mixers of that era call that monitor section, or something else. But on the Mackie it's called mix B, and it has its own level and pan control. This is what's known as an inline recording console. That means you've technically got two channels embedded in each one of these channel strips. You've got the main channel and then you've got the mix B channel. So the flip switch just brings the mix B signal, which is normally the tape input that we use to connect our audio interface to, down to the main channel. So for mixing on an 8-bus console like the Mackie 8-bus and a lot of other ones like the Soundcraft Ghost or the Soundtracs Topaz, you're going to have flip switches to bring those tape inputs down through the main channels instead of to the little rotary pots here. So once you have your audio interface outputs connected to the tape inputs on the console, and then you've pressed the flip switches here at the top, the signal from those tape inputs should be coming down through your main channels of your console. So that means you can use the channel EQ. Of course, on the Mackie, you can actually steal part of the EQ to use for the mix B or the monitor section. So you want to make sure that that split EQ button is up on that, so you have the full EQ on your main channels here. Then once you come down the channel strip, you've got to send that signal somewhere. If you don't have any of the assign switches on your channel strips assigned to go anywhere, the signal is going to come into the tape input from the flip switch down the channel, and then it has nowhere to go. So in this case we've just assigned it to the main left-right mix, although you can also assign it to groups of subgroups, and then you can assign subgroups to the main mix. Then of course you need to connect the output of your mixing console back to some inputs on your audio interface. In this case I've used the XLR outputs on the back of the Mackie 8-bus. It also has some 1/4-inch outputs up here if I didn't have the correct cables to connect that to my audio interface. So that's the basics of it. We have the outputs of an audio interface, and you can assign different tracks in your DAW to different outputs and send that out through the console using the tape inputs. Then we've used the flip switches to bring the tape input signal down the main channel instead of routing it to the mix B channel where it normally goes. Then we have made sure to assign our channel somewhere, in this case to the main left-right mix. Now this is just flashing with my voice because of the way I have things wired right now, and it also means I have some signal, so you can see that on the console, but this isn't actually anything but my voice that you're seeing on the meters right now. That's a really big thing, is to know inputs and outputs, because you don't want to plug an input into an input. There's nothing there to plug into an input if it's another input. So knowing signal flow, outputs and inputs, and the direction that audio or signal is supposed to flow, that's pretty important to know. So now that we've covered kind of the basics, we've also got some extra things that the console can do. The main things to be concerned about when you're mixing are the inserts and the Aux Sends. So I'm going to cover both of those. The insert on most consoles is only going to affect that channel. So say the insert here on channel 18 right there, if I plug something into this insert jack, it's not going to affect something that's on 24. it's just going to affect this one channel. Now an aux send is different. An auxiliary send can be thought of as taking a split of whatever signal is on this channel and sending it somewhere else to be used. That could be either an effects processor or it could be a headphone or a cue mix, which are the same thing, headphone and cue mix. So the aux sends on the Mackie, we have actually 6 aux sends, even though there are only 4 controls for that. The first 2 have a pre button, and that basically makes it a pre-fader aux send instead of a post-fader aux send like it normally is. The difference there is that a pre-fader aux send is independent of whatever the level is on the fader right here. Pre-fader aux sends are usually best for headphone mixes and things where you don't want that level to change when the fader level is changed. If you have a pre-fader aux send and you're using it on a reverb and then you take the actual dry signal out, the ghost of the reverb is still going to be there because of this pre-fader aux send. Usually for effects and things like that, I find that post-fader aux sends work better and pre-fader aux sends for headphone mixes and things like that. On the Mackie, the second 2 controls here for aux sends are 3, 4, and 5, 6, and you have a shift button to select between 3 and 4 with the button up or 5 and 6 with the shift button down. It also has a pre-fader switch just like aux 1 and 2, and then in addition it has a source switch. The source button here allows you to take the split of the signal either from the main channel or from mix B if you have the button pressed down. And again, you have a pre button, as these are also normally post-fader aux sends. I'm going to randomly choose an auxiliary send. In this case, I'm going to choose aux 2 here. I'll just turn that up on channel 17 so we can see that. So aux send 2, and let's see, let's turn it up on 23. So now these 2 aux sends are taking a split from whatever signal is on channel 17 and channel 23, combining those together and sending it somewhere else. In this case, over to the aux master for aux 2 right here, and then out of the aux 2 output, which I have connected to a little reverb pedal. And this reverb pedal actually has a switch for -10 or +4, so this can be used without a reamp, which is why I'm using it for this demonstration. So we have the aux 2 output patched into the input of our reverb processor. I've got them patched into one of the aux return channels, which come back here. We're on aux return 1, so we can turn that up to get our reverb. And then we've got assigned switches for this as well. So we've got to send this return somewhere. In this case, we'll send it to the left-right mix, the same as we've sent all the main channels. So now we are able to add reverb to whatever signal is on channel 17 and channel 23 here on the console. On the Mackie 8-bus and most 8-bus analog consoles, the Submasters are also going to have inserts. That's a really good way to do things like parallel compression. You can assign a signal to 2 different places at the same time over here on the channels, like subgroup 1 and 2 and the left-right mix. Then you can put a compressor on subgroup 1 and 2, and then you have a compressed version of whatever you've sent to that pair of subgroups. Or you can assign both to the same side and you can have a mono compression submix that way. A lot of these 8-bus consoles work in a very similar way, but you definitely want to read the manual because there are differences, subtle differences sometimes, bigger differences other times. The big differences would be that some are a split console where your tape return channels like mix B on the Mackie are actually in a separate section over here, but they can still usually be brought down the main channels by putting them into line input mode. Sometimes they're normaled inside. So let's go over the things in the master section that are useful for mixing. I am going to do a future video about tracking with an 8-bus console like the Mackie 8-bus. But in this video, we're going to concentrate on the features in the master section that are useful for mixing, which is pretty much all of them. Of course, we have Submaster inserts, which would be great for doing tricks like parallel compression using the subgroups. Then you've got your 6 Aux Send outputs here. You've got a main insert, so you have an insert on your master mix as well, so you can put a cool bus compressor on there or something. Then you've got all these stereo aux returns. There are 6 of those. Then you have the control room output, which is very useful for mixing because that's where you would connect your studio monitors. The main mix output on 1/4-inch jacks. I'm using the main mix XLR jack outputs on the back of the consoles today, but these 1/4 inch outputs for main mix do exist. Then you've got a separate mix B output for the mix B section or the monitor mix section. You've got 2 headphone outputs, and then over here a 2-track input, an external input, which is kind of the same thing as the 2-track input, and then a studio output. The control room and the studio output have a matrix in the master section to select different things to send to those sets of outputs. Make sure to check out some of my other Mackie 8-bus videos here on the channel. I have a little bit more of an overview of the console in one, and then I've actually tested it out, so make sure to check those out. I've connected 3 outboard compressors and an outboard reverb to the console. I connected a DBX 163X to channel 1, which is the kick drum. I've connected a Symetrix CL-100 to channel 2, which is the snare drum. Those are both connected to the insert jacks on the channels themselves. And then I connected the Klark Teknik KT2A to channel 24, which is going to be the lead vocal. I also have some reverb going courtesy of a NuX Atlantic delay and reverb pedal, which luckily for me has a line level switch, so I can use it with the Aux Sends and Aux returns on the mixing console. So let's test out my setup and see what the Mackie 8-bus sounds like. Before I played the demo, I have changed a couple of the compressors. I'm actually using this side of the LA Audio 4x4 compressor on the snare drum now because it has a gate with a little bit of EQ or filters, so I can actually gate the snare a little bit using the insert on the Mackie 8-bus still, and then I've moved the Symetrix CL-100 over to bass guitar duties using the insert on the Mackie 8-bus for both of those things over here.
And drive me out of my mind. You keep me running when I need to unwind. I know I can be what you want.
I've recently opened channel memberships here on the channel, so you can become a channel member at 3 different levels, all 3 of which includes my help with your analog gear. So make sure to check that out and become a channel member. That helps support this channel. Also, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the Twin Creek Audio YouTube channel if you have not done so already. I appreciate everyone out there that watches my videos. I hope each and every one of you has an excellent day, night, evening, weekend, weekday, hour, minute, second, nanosecond, whatever it is you're having. Have a good one. Thanks so much for watching.